I discovered that my wife was pregnant with her miracle child despite me being sterile. So, I played along for 9 months and then served her divorce papers while she was in labor. Now, she is begging me to stay and raise another man's baby. Hey Reddit. Throwaway for obvious reasons. I, 38M, married Megan, 33F, 2 years ago after dating for 3 years. She was way more eager to get married than I was, but I loved her and wanted to make her happy. Looking back, I should have paid more attention to how quickly she wanted to move things along, but hindsight is 20/20, right? We met at a friend's party in 2019, one of those summer cookouts where someone brings a guitar, there's too many fruit-flavored beers, and everyone ends up staying until 2 a.m. I work in operations management for a manufacturing company that produces machine parts, pays well but nothing fancy. I've been with them for almost 12 years now and have built a pretty solid career, with good benefits and a decent 401k. Megan was working at a marketing firm back then and seemed passionate about her career. She was constantly talking about campaigns she was working on and how she wanted to eventually become a creative director. She was outgoing and vibrant, always the center of attention at any gathering, while I've always been more reserved, the guy who prefers deep conversations with 1 or 2 people in the kitchen rather than being in the middle of the party. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant downtown, one of those family-owned places where the owner still makes homemade pasta every morning and comes out to chat with customers. We hit it off immediately and talked until closing time, about everything from our childhoods to our dream vacations. I remember being absolutely mesmerized by her laugh. She had this way of throwing her head back and just letting it all out that was completely infectious. By the time the owner politely told us they needed to close, I knew I was already falling for her. My brother Jake jokes that I'm aggressively average height, average build, receding hairline that's been slowly marching backwards since I hit 30, so I was genuinely surprised someone as vibrant and beautiful as Megan was interested in me. On our third date, I actually asked her what she saw in me, after a couple glasses of wine for courage. She said she loved how I listened, really listened, not just waited for my turn to talk. She said she'd dated too many guys who were all show and no substance. The irony of that statement now is not lost on me. Megan moved in with me after about 8 months of dating. Her apartment lease was ending, and it just seemed like the natural next step. I helped her move all her stuff in one weekend. She had an impressive collection of books and this massive wardrobe that barely fit in my closet. We had to buy an extra dresser just for her shoes. But I didn't mind. I was just happy to wake up next to her every morning. We quickly settled into this comfortable routine that felt like we'd been doing it for years. I'd get up early to hit the gym before work, and she'd have coffee waiting when I got back. She'd play music while making breakfast, usually something indie that I'd never heard of but grew to love. Weekends were spent hiking at this beautiful lake about an hour outside of town, or checking out local breweries, or just lounging around binge-watching shows together. We'd cook elaborate meals on Sundays that would provide leftovers for half the week. Life seemed absolutely perfect. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have found someone I could be so comfortable with, someone who seemed to just fit into my life like she'd always been there. I even told my mom once that it felt too good to be true. We had a small wedding at a local botanical garden in the spring, cherry blossoms everywhere, which made for some beautiful photos. Nothing fancy or extravagant, just close friends and family gathered in the garden's central pavilion. My brother was my best man, and Megan's college roommate was her maid of honor. We wrote our own vows, and I remember feeling so certain about our future as I promised to love and cherish her for the rest of my life. My parents were absolutely thrilled. They'd been pestering me about settling down for years, convinced I was going to end up alone with my collection of vintage vinyl records and camping gear. My mom cried through the entire ceremony and kept hugging Megan and calling her the daughter she never had. After the wedding, Megan quit her marketing job rather suddenly, saying she wanted to focus on our home and future family. I supported her decision, thinking she was just taking some time to figure out her next career move, maybe freelance or start her own business eventually. The first few months of marriage were a dream. We took a honeymoon to Costa Rica, spent 10 days exploring rainforests and lounging on beaches. When we came back, we settled into married life easily. Megan became really involved in decorating our house, turning it from my somewhat Spartan bachelor pad into a real home. She had great taste, I had to admit, the place had never looked better. Looking back, there were warning signs. She became increasingly focused on our finances, asking about my salary, investments, even my life insurance. I thought she was just being financially responsible since she wasn't working. I was naive. About a year ago, Megan started bringing up having a baby. Constantly. It wasn't on my radar, but she was incredibly persistent. She'd leave her phone open to baby websites, send me parenting articles, and mention her biological clock multiple times daily. I wasn't completely on board, but I figured it was a normal next step. The more she talked about it, the more I warmed to the idea. I started imagining teaching a kid to ride a bike or reading bedtime stories. I even caught myself thinking about nursery colors for the spare bedroom. So we started trying. And trying. And trying some more. After a few months with no success, things got tense. Every month when her period came, Megan would completely fall apart. At first, I tried to be supportive, bringing her favorite ice cream, suggesting weekend getaways. But as time went on, she became increasingly mean. She started making comments about my swimmers and how I wasn't man enough to get her pregnant. At a dinner with friends, she joked about how I couldn't perform when it counted. Everyone thought she meant some work presentation, but I knew what she meant. I was humiliated. Our sex life became mechanical and scheduled. She'd check her temperature, announce I'm ovulating, we need to do it now, then lie there afterward with her legs elevated, scrolling through her phone. My mental health deteriorated. I had trouble sleeping, my work performance suffered, and I was constantly walking on eggshells at home. After 6 months of this nightmare, I decided to get tested, without telling Megan, because I was terrified of her reaction if something was wrong with me. I went to a specialist during lunch and got tested. A few days later, I got the call that changed everything. The doctor told me I was completely sterile due to a congenital condition. I'd never be able to have biological children. I felt gutted. Even though having a baby wasn't initially my idea, I'd started imagining being a dad. Finding out it would never happen hit me harder than expected. I spent days trying to figure out how to tell Megan. Given her behavior, I was afraid of her reaction. Would she leave me? Blame me? I started researching adoption options, hoping that might soften the blow. But before I could work up the courage to tell her, Megan dropped her own bombshell. 4 days after my test results, Megan was bouncing with excitement when I got home. She'd made my favorite dinner, lit candles, and had this weird nervous energy. She sat me down and said she had amazing news. My heart pounded because I thought somehow she'd found out about my test. But no, she excitedly announced she was pregnant. I couldn't speak. It was like time stopped. All I could hear was buzzing in my ears as I processed what she was saying. I must have looked strange because she immediately asked if I was okay. Somehow, I managed to fake excitement. I smiled, hugged her, said all the right things. All while my brain screamed that this was impossible, medically, scientifically impossible. The next day, I got retested, wondering if there had been a mix-up. Nope. Same result. I was definitely sterile and had been my entire life. There was only one explanation: Megan was cheating, and this wasn't my baby. For the next few days, I was in detective mode while pretending everything was normal. I considered she might have gone to a sperm bank, but we share finances and I'm the only one working. There was no way she could have afforded fertility treatments without me knowing. Megan was planning a pregnancy announcement party, and I was going through the motions, smiling while trying not to throw up from stress. I didn't tell anyone, not my parents, not even my brother. It felt too humiliating. I started paying attention to Megan's behavior. She'd been working on her novel for months, always typing on her laptop, turning the screen away if I came near. I'd been supportive, thinking she was finding her passion. What a joke. I needed to know who she was cheating with and what she was planning. Something felt off about this whole pregnancy announcement. My chance came during the announcement party. Megan invited everyone, our families, friends, neighbors, co-workers. I noticed she seemed particularly excited when our neighbor Brad, 27M, arrived. Context about Brad: he moved across the street 8 months ago. He's tall, good-looking, trying to make it as a model. Lives in his aunt's house to save money. When he first moved in, Megan was super welcoming, cooking meals for him, inviting him over. I thought nothing of it, just being neighborly, right? At the party, I saw how Megan's face lit up when Brad walked in. She practically ran to hug him, and the hug lasted too long. No one else noticed, but to me, it was like watching puzzle pieces fall into place. I excused myself and went to our bedroom where Megan's laptop was. For months, she'd been working on her novel, always typing away, turning the screen if I approached. Her laptop wasn't password protected. I didn't find anything in her main email, but I remembered her mentioning a writing email for agent queries. I found it, and what I discovered made me physically ill. Dozens of emails between Megan and Brad going back months. Love declarations, explicit messages, plans to meet when I was at work. But the worst were the recent ones. Megan had told Brad she was pregnant, and he wasn't happy about it. Then I found the email. Megan had consulted with a lawyer friend about divorce strategy. The entire pregnancy was a trap. She was planning to divorce me right after the baby was born to get alimony and child support. The money would fund her and Brad's life once he made it big in modeling. I took pictures of everything, shut down the laptop, and somehow made it through the rest of the party without falling apart. Most people would have confronted her immediately. But something in me snapped. The level of manipulation, using a baby as a pawn, I couldn't just react. I needed a plan. So I played along. For 9 months, I was the perfect father-to-be. I went to every appointment, rubbed her feet, painted the nursery, assembled furniture, did midnight ice cream runs. Meanwhile, I quietly consulted a divorce lawyer and got my ducks in a row. I documented everything, secured my finances, and waited. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Every time she'd talk about our baby, put my hand on her stomach to feel kicks, or talk about what a great dad I would be, it was like being stabbed. I'd take long drives just to scream and cry where she couldn't see me. The holidays were the worst. Everyone was excited about the baby. Her mom bought a handmade family crib. My parents got a college savings fund certificate. All these people celebrating this lie, and I had to smile through it. The only thing keeping me going was knowing I wouldn't let her get away with this, using an innocent child to extort money from me for 18 years. Fast forward to last week. Megan went into labor, and I calmly drove her to the hospital. I'd called her parents, but not mine. I didn't want them involved. When she was settled in the delivery room, before her parents arrived, I decided it was time. I should probably call Brad, I said casually. He'd want to be here. Megan looked confused, then nervous. Why would you call him? I don't need our neighbor here while I'm giving birth. I smiled, probably not nicely, and pulled out 2 sets of papers, my fertility test results and divorce papers. Because, I said, according to these tests, I'm completely sterile. Have been my whole life. So this isn't my baby, Megan. And these are divorce papers. I know everything, the affair, the plan to divorce me for child support, all of it. Her face. I wish I had a picture. Complete shock, then panic, then calculation as she tried to figure out how to spin this. You've known this whole time? She finally said. Since the day you told me you were pregnant, I confirmed. I've seen the emails, Megan. All of them. I walked out while she was still struggling for words, called Brad to let him know Megan was in labor, then hung up, and walked to my car. I saw her parents arriving as I left, but I couldn't face them. I just drove. I'd packed a bag in my trunk, so I checked into a motel outside town and turned off my phone. For the first time in 9 months, I could breathe. I spent the night watching terrible TV, drinking a beer, first one in a year, and processing everything. The next morning, I turned my phone back on to hundreds of messages, from Megan, Brad, my family. I ignored Megan and Brad but called my parents and brother to explain. They were shocked but supportive. Dad just said he hoped things wouldn't get worse, his way of saying he was worried. That was a week ago. Megan's been blowing up my phone, alternating between anger that I ruined her birth experience, the audacity, and begging me to talk to her. Brad even messaged saying Megan had started falling back in love with me during the pregnancy and we should try to work things out. Yeah, right. If she was falling back in love with me, why was she still seeing Brad? Do they think I'm that stupid? It's been a week since the birth, and I've been staying in a hotel. I haven't seen Megan or the baby and don't plan to. She keeps calling and texting, but I've made it clear I'm not interested. I blocked Brad after he kept messaging about how Megan still has hope for us. They're just panicking because neither has a job. Megan was a stay-at-home wife, her choice, and Brad is struggling to find modeling gigs. Without my income, they're screwed. My lawyer says we can easily prove the affair, which should help me avoid alimony. The house is in my name, so I've given Megan time to move out before I return. Her parents are furious with her. Her dad texted to apologize for his daughter's behavior and said they've cut her off financially because she wanted to contest the divorce. The divorce negotiations have been going for a month, and Megan is losing badly. She's thrown everything at the wall to see what sticks, and nothing is working. Her latest move was trying to claim I was an alcoholic, completely false. I quit drinking entirely when we started trying for a baby, and that I was emotionally abusive throughout our marriage. All of this was easily disproven with testimony from friends, family, even her own parents who were horrified when they heard what she was claiming. Her lawyer, a shark in a pantsuit who specializes in women-scorned cases, tried to argue that I traumatized Megan by confronting her during labor and that this constituted some kind of emotional abuse that should be considered in the settlement. The judge actually laughed out loud when my lawyer presented the evidence of her affair and elaborate divorce scheme. When the emails where she explicitly discussed using the baby to get money from me were read into evidence, even her own lawyer looked uncomfortable. The judge, an older woman with the most intimidating gaze I've ever encountered, told Megan's lawyer that traumatizing someone with the truth of their own deception does not constitute abuse and that she should reconsider this line of argument. It was one of the few satisfying moments in this whole mess. The best part? A few days ago, I heard shouting and saw Brad pushing Megan and the baby out of his house, screaming obscenities. Once he realized she wasn't getting money from me, he decided he didn't want to play daddy. Despite everything, I couldn't watch a woman with a newborn being pushed around. I ran over, helped her up, and brought them into my house while I called her father. She cried the whole time, apologizing repeatedly, saying she'd been desperate to be with the one she loved and had lost all self-respect. Her father arrived an hour later and took her home. She promised to stop contesting the divorce and accept whatever settlement was offered. I don't know what will happen with her and the baby long term, but I hope she presses charges against Brad and gets her life together. Despite everything, I did what I thought was right. I couldn't let anger override basic decency. So that's where I am now, Reddit. The divorce should be finalized soon. I'm slowly picking up the pieces and moving forward, though some days are definitely better than others. It's hard to describe the emotional roller coaster I've been on. One moment I feel overwhelming relief that the charade is over, like I've been released from prison. The next, I'm consumed by anger at being so thoroughly deceived by someone I trusted completely. Then comes the crushing sadness for the life and family I thought I was building. And sometimes, usually late at night when I can't sleep, I feel this strange grief for the child that will never be mine, not because it's Brad's baby, but because I've learned I'll never have biological children of my own. The sterility diagnosis still hits me hard sometimes. Before all this happened, I hadn't really thought much about having kids. But now that I know it's not possible, I find myself noticing families everywhere, at the grocery store, at the park, at restaurants. It's like when you buy a new car and suddenly see that model everywhere. Except instead of a car, it's the one thing I can never have. My therapist says this is a separate grief process from the divorce, and I need to allow myself to feel it rather than just focusing on the betrayal. Speaking of therapy, I've been going twice a week. My therapist says my decision to wait and confront Megan during labor was partly a trauma response. I'd been in shock for months, living a lie, and my brain was trying to regain control of a situation where I'd been completely powerless. She says the coldness I showed in that moment was my mind's way of protecting itself from further harm. I don't know if that's true, but I don't regret exposing Megan when I did. I often wonder if I should have confronted her earlier, but then again, would she have admitted everything? Or would she have found a way to gaslight me and turn it around? Work has been understanding about me needing time. I'm thinking about selling the house, too many memories, and maybe moving to a different city. A fresh start sounds appealing. I've reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage. Turns out Megan had subtly isolated me, another red flag I missed. It was so gradual I didn't even notice it happening. First, she'd make small comments about how my friend Mark's wife always seemed to be looking at other men or how my buddy Steve drank too much whenever we hung out. Then she'd suggest alternative plans whenever I mentioned getting together with them. Eventually, I was seeing my friends maybe once every few months, if that. Looking back, I realized she did the same thing with my family, especially my brother who always seemed to see through her in a way that made her uncomfortable. She would complain about headaches whenever we were supposed to have dinner with my parents, or suddenly remember some important deadline when my brother wanted to come over to watch the game. Classic isolation tactics, but I was too in love to see it. My college buddy Dave reached out when he heard about what happened, word travels fast, and invited me on a fishing trip next month. We haven't really hung out in almost 2 years, but he called like no time had passed at all. Just hey man, heard what happened. That sucks. Wanna go catch some fish and drink beer for a weekend? That simple gesture nearly made me break down. It's amazing how the people who really care about you can just pick right back up no matter how much time has passed. My brother has been my absolute rock through all of this. He comes over several times a week, usually with takeout or groceries, and just sits with me watching games or movies or whatever. He doesn't push me to talk, but he listens when I need to vent. The other day he just looked at me and said, "You know you didn't deserve any of this, right?" Not one bit of it. Then went right back to watching the game. I almost lost it right there. When I told him about my sterility diagnosis, he just nodded and said, "Well, if you decide you want kids someday, there are options. And if you don't, you'll be the world's greatest uncle to my future kids. I'm counting on it." No drama, no pity, just practical support. I don't know what I'd do without him. The hardest part has been realizing how completely I was fooled. The woman I loved and trusted was capable of such calculated betrayal. Using a baby as a pawn was unforgivable. There's something uniquely devastating about realizing you never actually knew the person you shared your life with. I've spent countless nights replaying our entire relationship in my head, looking for clues I missed. Were there signs from the beginning that she was just using me? I remember this one time, about 6 months into our relationship, when she got really upset because I wouldn't add her to my cell phone plan. It seemed like such a minor thing at the time, and she apologized later saying she was just stressed about money. Now I wonder if that was the first test to see how easily she could access my finances. Sometimes I wonder if any of it was real. Did she ever love me? Was our relationship just an elaborate con from the start? Or did she genuinely love me at first, but then fall out of love and convince herself this scheme was justified? Maybe meeting Brad reignited something in her that made her realize she wasn't happy with me? Or was she just an opportunist who saw Brad as her ticket out of a marriage she was bored with, and the pregnancy as her meal ticket? I've driven myself half crazy with these questions, but my therapist says it doesn't actually matter. What matters is that regardless of what she felt or didn't feel, her actions were calculated, cruel, and designed to use me. She says I need to focus on healing myself rather than understanding Megan's motivations. Easier said than done, but I'm trying. What gets me through the darkest moments is knowing I didn't let her succeed. As horrible as this has been, at least I'm not trapped in a marriage with someone who sees me as nothing but a paycheck, raising a child that isn't mine while she continues her affair. I've been going to the gym daily, throwing myself into work, and trying to rediscover who I'm outside of Megan's husband. It's hard and lonely sometimes, but also freeing in a way I never expected. For anyone in a similar situation, trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And document everything. I'm not ready to think about dating again, not even close. I still flinch a little when an attractive woman smiles at me in the grocery store or at the gym. But I am starting to imagine a future that might still have some happiness in it. My therapist says I need to give myself permission to envision a life beyond this trauma, even if I'm not ready to pursue it yet. Maybe I'll adopt someday, or meet someone who already has kids. Or maybe I'll be the cool uncle to my brother's kids and focus on my career and friends. Jake and his wife have been trying for a baby for a while now, and I find myself genuinely excited at the prospect of being an uncle. I know I'd spoil those kids rotten, taking them camping, teaching them to fish, all the things my dad did with me. I've even started looking into volunteering with a local Big Brothers program. My therapist suggested it might be a healthy way to channel some of my parental instincts while helping a kid who needs a positive male role model. I have an interview with them next week. Not sure if I'm ready, but it feels good to at least take a step in that direction. The sterility thing still hurts, but I'm also starting to see that there are many ways to have children in your life that don't involve biological connections. And who knows? Maybe someday I'll meet someone amazing who will make me feel safe enough to open my heart again. Someone with the emotional maturity to understand that having biological kids isn't an option for me, but that doesn't mean I don't have plenty of love to give. Whatever happens, I know I'm stronger than I thought. I survived this betrayal, and I'll survive whatever comes next. If nothing else, this ordeal has taught me that I can endure more than I ever thought possible. And for that, I suppose I should be grateful. Not grateful that it happened, but grateful for what I've learned about myself in the process. Thanks for listening, Reddit. Writing this all out has been strangely therapeutic. And any advice, especially from those who've been through similar situations, would be greatly appreciated. TL.Dr. Found out my wife was pregnant despite me being sterile, discovered she was cheating with our neighbor and planning to divorce me after birth for child support, played along for 9 months, then served her divorce papers during labor. Neighbor kicked her out when he realized she wouldn't get money from me. Edit. Wow, this blew up overnight. Thanks for all the support. To answer common questions, yes, I'm in therapy. No, I don't think I'll ever be in contact with the baby, it's not my responsibility, and yes, I'm doing better each day. For those asking about legal issues with serving papers during labor, my lawyer assured me that while it might seem cold, it wasn't illegal and won't impact the divorce given the circumstances. So Reddit, was I the asshole for waiting 9 months and confronting her during labor? Or was my revenge justified given what she tried to do to me?